Commander Jun Park felt his stomach drop as the ship's alarms blared. The small scout vessel shook violently, red warning lights flashing across the control panel. Something had hit them, some kind of atmospheric disturbance the sensors hadn't detected. "Computer, status report," Jun shouted, his fingers dancing across the controls. "Hull integrity at 60%. Engine systems failing. Landing gear damage." The emotionless voice responded. Through the viewport, he could see a planet unlike any he'd encountered before, swirling patches of luminous vegetation breaking through cloud cover. This uncharted world wasn't even supposed to be habitable according to their preliminary scans. Yet here it was, pulling his ship down with unexpected gravitational force. "Mayday, Mayday." Earth Scout Vessel Horizon requesting emergency assistance. Jun broadcast on all frequencies. Nothing but static answered him. The ship plummeted through the atmosphere, the heat shield glowing red-hot. Jun fought the controls, trying to find a clearing in the dense forest below. At the last moment, he spotted a break in the canopy and aimed for it, firing what remained of the landing thrusters. The impact knocked him unconscious. When Jun opened his eyes, pale violet moonlight streamed through the cracked viewport. His head throbbed, but a quick self-assessment revealed no serious injuries. The ship's systems were mostly dead, with only emergency lighting functioning. "Computer, damage assessment," he croaked. "Communications array severely damaged. Propulsion systems offline. Life support functioning at minimal capacity." Jun sighed and unbuckled himself. He was stuck here until he could repair the communications array and call for help. The mission had been simple: chart the outer planets of this system and return. Now he was stranded. After gathering emergency supplies and a portable analyzer, Jun opened the hatch. The warm, humid air that rushed in carried a sweet scent that reminded him of the orchid gardens back on Earth. He activated his wrist light and stepped out onto alien soil. The clearing where he had crashed was surrounded by tall, bizarre plants. Some resembled Earth's trees, but with bark that glowed with soft blue light. Others looked like giant flowers with bulbous centers that pulsed with bioluminescence. It was beautiful, but eerie. As Jun circled his damaged ship, assessing the external damage, he felt a strange sensation, the feeling of being watched. He turned quickly, shining his light toward the edge of the clearing. Something moved in the undergrowth, not the random movement of wildlife, but deliberate, intelligent. "Hello," Jun called out, one hand moving to the stunner at his belt. "I mean no harm." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, figures emerged from between the glowing plants. At first, Jun thought they might be human. They had 2 arms, 2 legs, and stood upright. But as they moved closer, their differences became clear. Their skin had an opalescent quality that reflected the bioluminescent light around them. Where human skin might have pores or tiny hairs, theirs had subtle patterns that shifted like oil on water. Their eyes were larger than human eyes, with irises that seemed to change color as they moved, from deep purple to bright turquoise, and back again. Jun stood frozen, stunner half-drawn, as 5 of the beings approached him. They wore minimal clothing made from what looked like woven fibers that also gave off a subtle glow. One stepped forward, clearly female, with long hair that cascaded down her back in waves that shifted between silver and pale blue. She was tall and moved with fluid grace. "You are not harmed?" she asked in perfect standard English, shocking Jun. You speak my language," he stammered. She tilted her head. "We learn quickly. Your vessel has been transmitting signals since it entered our atmosphere. My name is Jun Park, commander with the Earth Exploration Corps. My ship crashed. I'm stranded." "I am Nera," she replied, touching her chest lightly. "We are the Nectar. This world is our home." She gestured to the others, introducing them. Ta, Minji, Duri, and Hyun. The older male, Tai, stepped forward. "Your arrival is fortunate. It has been many cycles since we have had visitors from beyond our skies. June studied them carefully. You've met other humans before. Nara and Tai exchanged a quick glance. Not humans specifically, Nara said, but others who travel between stars. Come, night brings dangerous creatures. Our village is nearby. June hesitated, years of first contact protocols flashing through his mind. But his ship was damaged, night was falling, and these beings seemed peaceful. He secured his ship and followed them. The walk through the forest was magical. Every plant seemed to glow with internal light, creating a natural pathway. The Nectar moved confidently, occasionally touching certain plants that brightened in response. The flora responds to you, June observed. Minji nodded. We share a connection with all living things here. The plants know our touch. After 20 minutes, they reached a clearing where massive flowering plants grew. Unlike anything June had ever seen, these titans rose 50 meters into the air, with giant blooms larger than his ship. Between and inside these megaflora, the Nectari had built their homes, elegant structures that seemed to be grown rather than built. Welcome to Nectar, Nara said, leading him into the village. Other Nectari emerged to see the visitor, their curious eyes shifting colors as they whispered among themselves. June noticed they all moved with the same fluid grace, and none appeared to be children or adolescents. You must be hungry, Nara said, leading him to a central area where several Nectari were preparing food. As they sat to eat, June explained his mission and his need to repair his communications array. The Nectari listened intently, asking intelligent questions about Earth and humans. We will help you repair your vessel, Ta promised. But first, rest. Learn about us. It is rare we have the opportunity to share our world. Later, as Nara showed June to a dwelling where he could sleep, he thought he saw her exchange a meaningful look with Ta. When she left, the elder Nectari gathered in a circle. The Earthling arrived just as the blooms mature, Ta whispered. After so long waiting, the timing couldn't be better. Nara nodded, her eyes shifting to a deep amber. Yes, this one is perfect. Strong, healthy. Exactly what we need. Unknown to June, as he drifted to sleep in the alien dwelling, the giant flowers above him began to produce their first drops of nectar, a substance that would prove both miraculous and dangerous in the days to come. June woke to the sound of soft music floating through the air. The dwelling the Nectari had given him was comfortable, with walls that seemed alive, pulsing gently with the same bioluminescence as the forest outside. He stretched and checked his portable scanner. The atmosphere was safe, with oxygen levels slightly higher than Earth's, explaining the pleasant lightheadedness he'd felt since arriving. Outside, the village was alive with activity. The Nectari moved with purpose, carrying containers to and from the massive flowering plants that dominated the settlement. June spotted Nara directing several others as they carefully collected something from one of the giant blooms. Good morning, she called when she saw him. Did you rest well? Better than I expected, June admitted. I need to check on my ship, assess the damage properly. Nara nodded. Of course. But first, eat. Our morning meal will give you strength. The food was unlike anything he had tasted before. Fruits with textures that changed as you chewed them, and beverages that sparkled with natural effervescence. Everything had that same sweet undertone he'd noticed in the air. What is that smell? June asked as they ate. It's everywhere. Ta, who had joined them, smiled. You noticed the nectar. Today is special. The great flowers have begun their production cycle. It happens only once every 7 years. The nectar is life to us, Nara added, her eyes shifting to a warm golden hue. It sustains us, heals us, connects us to the planet. After the meal, Hyun, one of the younger Nectari males, offered to escort June back to his ship. As they walked through the forest, June noticed the plants seemed even more active than the night before, their glow pulsing in patterns that almost seemed like communication. At the ship, Joan ran diagnostics on the communications array. The transmitter is damaged, but fixable, he told Hyun. I'll need 3 or 4 days to repair it with the materials I have on board. Hyun watched him curiously. Your technology is different from what we've seen before. Most visitors have ships that heal themselves. June looked up sharply. How many visitors have you had? Not many, Hyun said, seeming suddenly uncomfortable. 1 every few cycles. They never stay long. June spent the day working on repairs, while periodically scanning the surrounding area and collecting data on the unusual ecosystem. The Nectari were friendly, bringing him food and asking questions about Earth. Yet something felt off. They seemed especially interested in human biology, asking detailed questions about his digestive system and metabolism. As evening approached, Nara came to escort him back to the village. Tonight is special, she explained. The first nectar ceremony of the harvest cycle. We would be honored if you would join us. Back at the village, June found the Nectari in festive spirits. They had adorned themselves with bioluminescent paint that made patterns on their skin glow in complex, shifting designs. A large gathering space had been cleared beneath the largest of the flower structures. In the center of this space stood a pool filled with amber liquid that glowed with its own inner light. The sweet smell was strongest here, making June feel slightly dizzy just standing near it. This is the nectar, he asked Nara. Yes, she said, her voice reverent. The purest first harvest. Tonight we celebrate its return and share in its gifts. The ceremony began with music, sounds produced both by instruments and the Nectari's voices, which had a hypnotic, multi-toned quality. Several began to dance around the pool, their movements fluid and mesmerizing. Tai approached with a small crystal cup filled with the glowing nectar. We offer you the honor of the first taste, as our guest from the stars. June hesitated. His training warned against consuming alien substances without thorough analysis. I appreciate the honor, but I should analyze it first. Human biology might react differently. Of course, Nara said quickly, though June noticed her eyes flickered to a dull gray momentarily. But I assure you, it is safe. Many visitors have shared our nectar before. Throughout the night, the Nectari drank from the pool, their skin becoming more luminous with each sip. Their movements grew more fluid, their eyes brighter. They continued to offer the nectar to June, each time more insistently. During a quiet moment, June took a sample when no one was looking, slipping it into his portable analyzer. The results were fascinating. The nectar contained complex compounds his scanner couldn't even identify, along with powerful psychoactive elements. As the celebration continued, June noticed something else strange. While examining a wall of what appeared to be historical carvings, he found images that seemed to depict the Nectari with other alien species, and in one disturbing panel, what looked like a being drinking nectar, then becoming encased in a flower-like structure. Interesting, isn't it? A voice said behind him. June turned to find a younger Nectari male he hadn't met before. I'm Juan, the Nectari said quietly. You haven't drunk the nectar. I'm being cautious, June replied. Juan nodded, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. Good. Be cautious. The nectar is not just a celebration. It has purpose. Before June could ask what he meant, Nara approached. Juan quickly moved away, pretending to examine another carving. Are you enjoying the ceremony? Nara asked, offering yet another cup of nectar. It's fascinating, June said, taking the cup but only pretending to sip. I'm curious, though. I haven't seen any children in your village. Do you have families? Something flickered across Nara's face. Surprise, perhaps concern. Our reproduction is complex. We have not had new offspring for many cycles. Why not? It is difficult to explain, she said, her tone suddenly formal. Perhaps tomorrow, when you're more familiar with our ways. Later that night, as June lay in his dwelling, he reviewed the day's events. The Nectari were hiding something about the nectar and their reproduction. The murals, Juan's warning, their excessive interest in his digestive system. It all pointed to something concerning. He drifted to sleep uneasily, dreaming of nectar that flowed like liquid gold and nectary eyes that watched him with hunger rather than hospitality. Outside, Nera met with Tai and other elders beneath the great flower. "The Earthling resists the nectar," one said. "This is problematic." "Patience," Tai counseled. "Humans are curious by nature. He will drink eventually, especially when he learns what it offers." "And if he doesn't?" Nara asked. Tai's eyes shifted to a deep dark red. "Then we must ensure he cannot leave. The flowers are ready. After so many cycles of waiting, we cannot miss this opportunity." Unknown to them, Juan listened from the shadows, his divided loyalties weighing heavily on his conscience. June woke early the next morning and slipped quietly from his dwelling. The village was still mostly asleep, giving him the perfect opportunity to investigate. He needed answers about the nectar and the nectary's unusual interest in him. The giant flowering plants looked different in the pale morning light, their blooms partially closed, pulsing slowly like sleeping hearts. June approached the largest one, where last night's ceremony had taken place. The nectar pool still glowed faintly, its sweet scent hanging heavily in the air. He took out his scanner and collected another sample. This time, he ran a more thorough analysis, including a molecular breakdown. The results made his eyebrows rise in surprise. The nectar contained complex proteins that seemed designed to interact with digestive enzymes, specifically enzymes not found in the nectary's own biology. "Curious about our life essence?" a voice asked. June spun around to find Juan standing behind him, arms folded across his chest. "You startled me," Jun said, quickly pocketing his scanner. "I'm just trying to understand your world better." Juan glanced around nervously. "We don't have much time. The others will wake soon." He motioned for June to follow him away from the central area. They walked quickly to the edge of the village, stopping beneath a smaller flowering plant that seemed less developed than the others. "You were right to refuse the nectar," Juan said quietly. "It's not what they claim it to be." "What is it then?" June asked. Juan's eyes shifted to a muted blue, a color June had come to associate with sadness or worry. "The nectar is part of their reproductive cycle. The nectary cannot process it themselves. They need another species to digest it and transform it." "Transform it into what?" "A catalyst," Juan explained. "Without it, they cannot produce offspring. Their reproductive system evolved alongside another species long ago, a symbiotic partnership, but that species died out generations ago." June's mind raced as pieces fell into place. "So they need visitors to help them reproduce." "Yes. The nectar must pass through a specific digestive system to be activated. Once consumed, it creates a euphoric effect while it uses the host's body to process the compounds." "And then what happens to the host?" June asked, though he suspected the answer already. Juan looked away. "They become part of the cycle. The process doesn't kill them, but they remain in a dreamlike state while the nectary extract what they need." June remembered the mural he'd seen, the figure being encased in a flower-like structure. "They trap them. They see it as necessary survival," Juan said, not malicious. "But yes, they trap them." "How do you know all this? Why are you helping me?" Juan's skin patterns shifted nervously. "I am different. My father was a visitor who wasn't fully processed. Some of his genetic material entered the reproductive cycle before the process was complete. That's why I can feel empathy for you. I'm not pure nectary." A rustle of movement caught their attention. Nara emerged from a nearby dwelling, looking around as if searching for someone. "You should go back to your ship today," Juan whispered urgently. "Say you need materials for repairs. I'll find you there later." June nodded, and they separated quickly. He approached Nara with a fabricated smile. "Good morning," he said casually. "I was just admiring your incredible flora." Nara's suspicious look faded. "Did you rest well? Many find the first night after a nectar ceremony." vivid with dreams. I slept fine, Jun replied. I need to return to my ship today. There are specialized tools I need for the communication repairs. Of course, Nara said. Tai would like to speak with you first, though, about a cultural exchange. Jun found Ta in a structure that seemed to function as a council chamber. Inside, detailed murals depicted the Nectary's history, including clear images of various alien species consuming nectar and then being encased in plant-like pods. Commander Park, Ta greeted him. I hope you found our ceremony enlightening. Very, Jun said carefully. Your relationship with these plants is fascinating. Ta nodded. It goes beyond fascination. It is existence itself. His eyes shifted to a deep amber. You didn't drink the nectar. It wasn't a question. Jun decided direct confrontation was his best strategy. I know what the nectar does, he said firmly. I know you need another species to process it for your reproduction. I know what happens to those who drink it. Instead of denying it, Tai simply sighed. Juan spoke to you, I presume. He always had too much outsider influence in his makeup. So it's true. Yes, Tai admitted. But you misunderstand. It's not harm we intend. Those who join our cycle experience only pleasure. They become part of something greater than themselves. We give them eternal bliss in exchange for helping us survive. You trap them against their will, Jun countered. We offer a choice, Tai insisted. Drink or don't drink. But those who drink rarely regret their choice. The nectar shows them wonders beyond imagination. At that moment, Nara entered with several other Nectari. Your ship's communication array has been disabled, she announced without preamble. We cannot allow you to call others until you understand what we offer. Jun's hand moved to his stunner, but he was outnumbered. You can't force me to drink. No, Tai agreed. But the nectar harvest only occurs every 7 years. We cannot reproduce without it. Our numbers dwindle. We need you, Commander Park. There must be another way, Jun argued. My people have advanced biological technology. We could help you synthesize whatever enzyme you need without trapping anyone. Nara and Tai exchanged looks. You would help us willingly? Nara asked, sounding genuinely surprised. That's what humans do, Jun said. We solve problems. We find compromises, but not if you keep me prisoner. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside. Another Nectari burst in, eyes flashing anxious green. The blooms are accelerating their cycle, the newcomer reported. We have less time than we thought. Tai turned back to Jun, his expression hardening. I'm sorry, Commander. We cannot risk our entire species on your promises. Tonight, you will join us at the Great Bloom. One way or another, you will help us survive. As Jun was escorted back to his dwelling and placed under guard, he caught a glimpse of Juan watching from a distance, his eyes conveying a clear message. Prepare to run. Jun paced in his dwelling, searching for any way out. 2 Nectari guards stood outside, their skin patterns pulsing with alert vigilance. He checked his equipment. The stunner was fully charged, but using force would only be a last resort. He needed a better plan. The afternoon sun filtered through the translucent walls, casting everything in a pale green glow. Jun had examined every corner of the space twice when a soft tapping sound caught his attention. It came from the back wall, where the structure connected directly to the giant flower stalk. Cautiously, he pressed his ear against the wall. The tapping continued, forming a pattern he recognized. An old Earth distress code. Someone was trying to communicate. Jun tapped back, and moments later, a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow passage inside the plant itself. Juan's face appeared in the opening. Quickly, Juan whispered. The stalks have transport channels, the Nectari use for maintenance. I can get you to your ship. They said they disabled my communications array, Jun said, gathering his essential equipment. They did, but they don't understand human technology as well as they think. I can help you bypass the damage. June squeezed into the passage, which was warm and humid. The inner walls of the plant pulsed with bioluminescence, providing enough light to see. They began crawling through the organic tunnel. The Great Bloom ceremony starts at sunset, Juan explained as they moved. They'd prepared a special concentration of nectar for you, stronger than usual. Once you drink, the transformation begins within minutes. What exactly happens during this transformation? Your consciousness remains, but your body becomes connected to the plant system. Your digestive organs process the nectar compounds, creating the catalyst they need. It's not painful, but you lose all autonomy. They reached a junction where several tunnels branched off. Juan hesitated, his skin patterns flickering with anxiety. "Something's wrong," he whispered. "They know you're gone. The plants are communicating." As if confirming his words, the tunnel walls began pulsing more rapidly, changing from blue to a warning red. A distant sound, like rushing water, grew louder. "They're flushing the channels." "Run," Juan shouted. They sprinted through the tunnel as a wave of amber liquid, nectar in its raw form, surged through the channel behind them. They barely made it to an exit point, tumbling out into the forest as the nectar gushed from the opening. They were on the outskirts of the village, the forest stretching before them. In the distance, Jim could see his crashed ship. "We need to hurry," Juan said. "The forest itself will work against us now." They ran through the bioluminescent vegetation, which began reacting to their presence. Plants curled away from them, while others extended tendrils to block their path. The sweet scent in the air grew stronger, making June feel lightheaded. "The whole ecosystem is connected," Juan explained between breaths. "The nectary can communicate with it, direct it. The plants are their eyes and ears." Behind them, voices called out. The pursuit had begun. June glanced back to see several nectary, including Nara, following their trail. Their skin glowed brightly with agitation, making them easy to spot among the trees. "We can't outrun them," June realized. "They know this terrain too well." "We don't need to outrun them," Juan replied. "Just reach your ship and repair the communications." As they ran, June noticed Juan's movements becoming slower. His breathing labored. "What's wrong?" he asked. "My mixed genetics," Juan gasped. "I'm not as connected to the ecosystem as pure nectary. Being cut off from it weakens me." They reached the edge of the clearing where June's ship lay. To their dismay, 3 nectary were already there, standing guard. "There's another way," Juan whispered, pulling June back into the cover of the glowing foliage. "The main nectar reservoir. It's just beyond that ridge." "Why would we go there? Isn't that exactly where they want me?" "They want you to drink processed nectar. The raw reservoir is different. The concentration is too high for their purposes, but it might contain what we need." With no better option, June followed Juan through the forest, climbing a steep ridge until they reached a plateau. Before them lay an incredible sight. A massive natural basin filled with glowing amber liquid. The nectar reservoir was enormous, at least 50 meters across, its surface bubbling gently as if alive. "What is your plan?" June asked, awed by the sight. Before Juan could answer, the foliage behind them parted. Nara emerged, followed by Tai and several other nectary. Their skin patterns flashed with a combination of anger and triumph. "There is nowhere else to run," Nara said, her voice carrying across the open space. "Please understand, we take no pleasure in forcing this choice upon you." "Then don't," June replied. "Let me help you another way." Ta stepped forward. "Our species faces extinction. We cannot risk our survival on untested alternatives." "Your method isn't just wrong, it's unnecessary," June argued. "My people have technology that could synthesize whatever enzyme you need." "Empty promises," Ta dismissed. "Every 7 years, we require the catalyst. Without it, no new nectary will ever be born." As they talked, Jun noticed Juan slipping something from a pouch, a small device he recognized as one of his own sample analyzers. Juan had taken it from his equipment. "The ceremony begins at sunset," Nara announced. "You will join us willingly or not." Suddenly, Juan dashed toward the reservoir's edge. "The molecular structure," he shouted to June. "It's in the analyzer." The Nectari lunged to intercept him. But Juan was faster. He reached the edge of the reservoir and tossed the analyzer to June, who caught it reflexively. "The raw nectar contains the original compound," Juan called out. "Before processing. The solution is there." Two Nectari tackled Juan, restraining him at the reservoir's edge. June found himself surrounded, with Nara approaching slowly, holding a crystal cup filled with processed nectar. "Drink," she said softly. "Become part of something beautiful." June glanced at the analyzer in his hand, then at the massive reservoir behind them. A desperate plan began forming in his mind. "I have a counteroffer," he said, stepping backward until he stood at the very edge of the reservoir, the sweet-scented liquid bubbling just inches from his heels. June stood at the edge of the nectar reservoir, the analyzer clutched tightly in his hand. The Nectari had formed a half-circle around him, their opalescent skin glowing with tension. Nara still held out the cup of processed nectar, her eyes shifting between amber and red. "Stay back," June warned, "or I'll jump into the reservoir." "That would be suicide," Ta said sharply. "Raw nectar in that concentration would overwhelm your system instantly." "Then we have a problem," June replied, activating the analyzer to scan the bubbling liquid behind him. "You need me alive to process your nectar, and I refuse to be your prisoner." The analyzer beeped, displaying complex molecular structures. June studied them quickly, his scientific training kicking in. The raw nectar's composition was fascinating, a biological precursor that required specific enzymes to transform it into the reproductive catalyst the Nectari needed. "I need time to think," Jun said, buying himself precious moments to analyze the data. "And I want Juan released." The Nectari holding Juan looked to Ta, who nodded reluctantly. They released him, and Juan moved to Jun's side, his breathing still labored. "What did you discover?" Juan whispered. "The enzyme they need from my digestive system. It's similar to a compound we synthesize on Earth for food processing," Jun murmured. "If I can convince them." He raised his voice. "I have a proposal. A true exchange that benefits both our species." "We're listening," Nara said cautiously. "The enzyme you need. Humans can synthesize it artificially. We don't need to trap visitors in your flowers. We could provide the enzyme in exchange for knowledge. Botanical knowledge, scientific exchange." Tay's eyes narrowed. "Impossible. The processing is complex, requiring living tissue." "Not true," Jun countered, holding up the analyzer. "The molecular structure is unusual but not impossible to replicate. Earth's biochemistry labs could synthesize this enzyme within months." "Months?" Nara exclaimed. "The great bloom will be over in days." "I can prove it works," Jun said. He pulled a small medical kit from his belt and extracted a vial. "This contains digestive enzymes from my medical supplies. Basic human enzymes for emergency use. Watch." He carefully dipped the vial into the reservoir, collecting a small amount of raw nectar. Then he added a drop of the enzyme solution. The mixture swirled, changing color from amber to a brilliant blue. The Nectari gasped collectively, their skin patterns flashing with surprise. "The catalyst forms," Ta said in disbelief, "without the living host." "This is just a crude demonstration," Jun explained. "With proper equipment, we could produce the enzyme in quantity, enough for your entire reproductive cycle." "And what would you want in return?" Nara asked, lowering the cup she had been offering. "Knowledge exchange. Your botanical science is centuries ahead of ours. The way you communicate with plants, your understanding of biological systems, it could help solve problems on Earth. Sustainable food production, environmental restoration, medicine." The Nectari conferred among themselves, their skin patterns shifting rapidly, and what June had learned was their way of quick communication. Finally, Tai turned back to them. "If what you say is true, it would change everything. But how can we trust you? Once you leave our world, what guarantees do we have?" "I propose a temporary solution for this bloom cycle," Jun said. "Help me repair my ship. I'll contact Earth and request an emergency science team with the necessary equipment. They can produce enough enzyme for this cycle while we negotiate a long-term agreement. And if they refuse?" "They won't," Jun said confidently. "Humans are explorers, but we're also problem solvers. This kind of mutually beneficial exchange is exactly what we seek in space." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the reservoir, Nara stepped forward. "We accept your proposal, Commander Park. But understand, if your people cannot deliver what you promise, we will have no choice but to return to our old methods." "Agreed," Jun said. 3 days later, Jun stood beside his repaired ship, communications array now functioning perfectly. The Nectari had worked diligently to help him, once they understood the potential benefit. Beside him stood Huan, who had become his unofficial liaison with the Nectari Council. "The Earth Science Vessel responds," Jun said, reading the message on his communicator. "They're dispatching a team with biochemical equipment, arrival estimated in 14 hours. Huan's skin glowed with hopeful blue patterns. "Do you really believe this will work?" "I do," Jun replied. "The enzyme synthesis is straightforward for our technology. What you're offering in return, your botanical knowledge, is worth far more to us." That evening, as the massive flowers throughout the village began their bloom cycle, pulsing with expectant light, the Nectari held a different kind of ceremony. Instead of preparing a visitor for processing, they celebrated a new possibility, a future where reproduction didn't require sacrifice. Nara approached Jun, offering him a different cup, this one filled with a clear liquid. "Water," she said with a smile. "No nectar, a symbol of our new understanding." "To cooperation," Jun said, accepting the drink. The Earth Science Vessel arrived the next morning, landing in the clearing beside Jun's ship. A team of specialists emerged, carrying equipment and eager to begin work. Among them was Dr. Minji Song, Earth's leading xenobiologist. "This is incredible," Dr. Song said after her first briefing. "Their botanical communication network alone could revolutionize our understanding of plant systems." Within 2 days, the Earth team had synthesized enough of the enzyme to activate the nectar. The Nectari added it to their reservoir, and for the first time in generations, they could complete their reproductive cycle without capturing visitors. A week later, Jun stood with Nara and Huan, watching as tiny buds formed on the smaller plants throughout the village, the first new generation of Nectari in decades. "You've saved our future," Nara said, her eyes glowing a bright, joyful blue. "We will never forget this." "This is just the beginning," Jun replied. "The treaty we've outlined includes regular exchanges, scientific missions, knowledge sharing. Both our worlds will benefit." As Jun prepared to depart with the science vessel, leaving behind a permanent research team, Huan approached him. "You could have escaped alone," Huan said. "Why risk everything to help us?" Jun smiled. "That's what humans do at our best. We don't just survive the universe. We try to make it better. Even when it seems impossible, we find another way." The science vessel lifted off, carrying Jun back toward Earth. From the viewport, he watched the Nectari village recede below, its massive flowers now glowing with renewed purpose, not as traps, but as cradles for a new generation born of cooperation rather than exploitation. Human ingenuity had transformed a potential tragedy into a triumph of mutual benefit, and as distant stars came into view, Jun wondered what other seemingly impossible problems waited to be solved among them.